Welcome to the Conscious Living Podcast, conversations to educate, empower, and enlighten our world. An uplifting and inspiring series of conversations and talks with your host, Jackie Woodside. We are educating minds, empowering lives, and enlightening souls to create a world where love prevails. In this engaging podcast, we deliver exciting, positive, transformative talks and teachings designed to elevate your life. Now, let's join our host, Jackie Woodside, for this week's session.
Hey everybody, Jackie Woodside here, the founder and the host of the Conscious Living Podcast, where we are here to educate, empower, and enlighten our world. Thank you so much for spending your time with us, wanting to think deeply about what it means to live life more consciously and to improve your game, to learn more every single day, to becoming more conscious. It means the world to me that you would spend time here with me. And I'm just so excited to bring a topic to the fore today that I think many of you will find interesting and that I've spent many, many years of my life devoted to, but have not addressed yet on the Conscious Living Podcast. And that topic is mental health. So as many of you know from having followed me on the Conscious Living Podcast, I was a therapist for 30 years. So it's certainly a strong part of my professional and personal background to think about our mental and emotional health and well-being and to practice various strategies and approaches and to help people around their well-being. But today I'm bringing forward someone who has a very fascinating, interesting, and unique approach to this whole topic of mental health. Dan King is the founder of Fireside Strategies. He's a Canadian entrepreneur. And what Fireside does is it acquires mental health practices so that the clinicians can actually be about the business of mental health rather than be about the business of running a business. So Dan, welcome to the Conscious Living Podcast. And if you don't mind, just flesh out a little bit more about yourself, your journey, and what led you to this very interesting entrepreneurial endeavor of acquiring mental health practices.
Well, appreciate the invitation, Jackie. It's a pleasure to be with you and can't wait to go deep on all those wonderful subjects today. So, huge part of my journey is mental health and burnout. I started professional life as a corporate lawyer, first at a very large law firm, and then working with one of the investors on the Shark Tank TV show. And law is an intense profession. They do not take it easy on you. And it was the first of a number of experiences with what we typically call burnout for me.
Okay.
I found myself in some pretty tricky situations where no doctor could really help. No one quite understood at the time exactly what was going on. And I felt an intense pressure to achieve. I was in this world of law where everyone wanted to succeed and everyone would prioritize achievement over fulfillment because there's almost this kind of bargain that, oh, there'll be time later for your health. Oh, there'll be time later to be happy. Right now, you got to grind.
Yeah.
So that's the world that I was in. Yeah. And it did a great deal of damage to me. Some people can survive in it longer than others. For whatever reason, I just have to be honest and admit to myself that it wasn't where I was supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the questions that experience raised, were very deep and interested me. I was very curious about why was it that I seemed to be more sensitive than some other people? Why was it that I had the experience of wanting to leave faster than some of my colleagues? And so I went back to school and I studied psychology. And I sought answers both in a university setting as well as in meditative, contemplative practice, a variety of different disciplines. And I started to see that this issue of burnout was showing up not just in the legal industry, but in many other industries, including, unfortunately, mental health.
Right.
Which is kind of sad, right? Because, after this COVID pandemic, mental health professionals are at the front lines of working on these sorts of challenges.
Yeah.
And for they themselves to have some of the same challenges, are they really best positioned at the moment? And is the industry really best positioned to, amongst other things, address burnout and similar sorts of questions in the general population?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this problem has interested me for a long time, and at Fireside Strategic, we're exploring some big solutions, which we can get into. But that's sort of, I think, the relevant background.
Great. So let's dive in a little bit to this notion of burnout, Dan. How are you using the phrase, and what were some of your own personal experiences with it? What were you experiencing that led you to, kind of down this very intense interest in the field or the study of burnout?
Yeah. Burnout is, amongst other things, this sort of sense of meaninglessness and futility.
Okay.
Which very often, and I'm going to speak solely about the type A achievement-oriented personality here, that kind of personality runs into it in contexts in which very often in which they feel immense pressure to achieve, but their body is telling them no. Something about this status quo at a very fundamental level isn't sustainable. And so over time, the mind and the body will come together to say no. For some years, these sorts of questions have been approached purely through the lens of mental health. And what I have found through my journey, both of experiencing what we might call burnout as lawyer, and then as entrepreneur with a number of companies, one of which I sold, the level of success that I experienced, I would say from a conventional perspective in terms of, the money I made, all of that sort of thing, things varied. Sometimes I was successful, sometimes I wasn't. The entrepreneurial journey is like that.
Right.
But I noticed that when I was misaligned, that didn't matter. The level of achievement that others felt I was responsible for, that really didn't matter. What mattered most was what my mind and body together were saying, the messages that they were sending me. And in so many instances, they were saying, you're misaligned. Something's not right here. That message, if I took the time to slow down and listen to it, if I could get out of the achievement treadmill for a few minutes and listen to it, that message was unmistakable.
And how did you experience it?
I experienced it in a number of different ways, but one of the most profound experiences came on a 10-day silent meditation retreat.
Wow.
One of the sort of best known, and perhaps some of your listeners have had the experience of going on a Goenka Vipassana retreat. It's quite well known all across North America and the world. And sitting in silence for 10 days surprised me most in the following way. My body started to speak to me in ways that it had never done before. I thought at a simplistic level before I really started meditating about 10 years ago that meditation was some form of mind control. It was a way to understand and sort of harness my mind. The achievement-oriented part of me was like, it's a way to control my mind to achieve more.
Right.
But let's go beyond the mind for a second and say that because the body and the mind are so integrated, and science is showing this more and more every day, what really spoke to me more than my mind was my body. I felt this throbbing sensation of suffering deep in my stomach.
Wow.
I had felt that some years before the silent retreat, but work I had done that I thought had eliminated it had really just buried it.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 10 days of silence, when all you have is your thoughts and your experience of the present moment, there's no hiding anymore.
Yeah.
And so that throbbing sensation in my stomach reemerged so powerfully that I thought it was a mistake to have gone on the retreat.
Yeah. So did you felt sick or you felt in pain?
I felt that whatever this was, my initial sense of it, whatever it was that something was fundamentally wrong with the way I was living.
Oh, wow.
And this wasn't just physical pain. This was what I would call a spiritual pain.
So you had like a real life message out of this physical experience.
That's right.
Wow. Yeah. I wrote a book years ago called Calming the Chaos, and it's self-management, a book about, managing yourself rather than managing time. And one of the things I say in there is that the way we're living and working isn't working. And it sounds like you really came face to face with that reality.
No question, no question. And grateful for it in retrospect, because it has helped me find new purpose. And it's, I think, part of what has helped me transcend that burnout. But it's nothing to take lightly. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And so what's the prevalence of it in our world today? Like, what do you see? And I'm curious if you saw a difference pre and post COVID You know, we hear about the great resignation and people really
Yeah.
making different lifestyle choices post-COVID.
Yeah.
So I'm curious your thoughts about that. You know, certainly as a therapist for many years, you know, this is going way back. You know, people definitely were burned out a lot, and not because of the patient care per se, but because of the whole system inside of which patient care occurred. The insurance industry, hospitals, you know, access to hospitals, or I worked in a psychiatric hospital for a time. The systems, I worked in prisons. So the systems around the psychiatric care or the mental health care were really just dysfunctional and toxic.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on the prevalence of burnout in our world today? And then, I'm sorry, I shouldn't ask more than one question at a time, but I don't want to lose this. And then if you will, also linking it, kind of your thoughts to kind of the big three killers in our world today: depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. So I'm curious about all, you know, I think there's a huge correlation between burnout and those three big killers, but go ahead, thoughts on both of those.
Yeah, great questions. And if I miss anything you think is significant, let me know. But I think I'm going to tackle both together at a high level and say that as an initial answer, and I'm by no means the world's greatest expert, but substance abuse, addiction, these things relate to numbing in many ways. Burnout and conditions like it have been prevalent for many years, in part, especially for the high achieving, not just the high achieving, but especially for the high achieving, because they're perpetually dissatisfied, right? They do the work they do out of a desire to meet unmet needs.
Yeah.
And if a need that is deeply important to you is unmet, you may not quite know what you're doing, but you will numb in various ways.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm glad that you kind of corrected me, although you didn't do that with intention, but to move from substance abuse to addiction, because I'm sure you well know that one of the highest, most prevalent addictions is internet pornography and scrolling, you know, addicted to your phone. Can you get addicted to your phone? Absolutely, you can get addicted to your phone because of how it impacts your brain. You know, with the dopamine hits in your body, and then the need for more and more and more of that. And the same with gaming, whether gambling, gaming, or online gaming, both have the same thing. But yeah, so it's not substance abuse, it is addiction. So I'm glad that you said that.
Well, it's interesting that, as a brief digression, then I want to get back to your larger question, which was really, really interesting. And that is that addiction has a stigma. Luckily, that's diminishing, but no one ever wants to face up to it. But I think you're right on point when you say that technology is an addiction. It's an addiction for almost all of us in the developed world. And so we are all addicts. We classically think of addicts as people that drink, right? But the reality is we are all addicts in one kind or another. And part of what I think we need to do as a society is face up to that truth, to further destigmatize the need for true, full body, not just mental health, but mental plus the rest of it, right? True holistic help for all of us. But on this question of what did I think of the pandemic and how does that relate to addiction? Well, I think burnout and deep, deep anguish has been with us, buried deep within us for many, many years due to some of these things we're talking about. And the thing about watershed moments, the thing about these, let's call them clarifying moments, like my Vipassana retreat, my meditation retreat, or like the pandemic, is you can't hide any longer. Your body, if you slow down enough to listen to it, your body will tell you that something is off, right? And so the statistics say one thing, but I'll tell you that these challenges have always been there. And one of the things the pandemic did that was a good thing, ultimately, is that I think it was a clarifying moment where now we can't hide any longer. And we've got to be able to talk about these things openly.
It's shown the light of awareness under what was already going on in people's worlds. Absolutely. So burnout, you know, unchecked. I had a friend who went through adrenal overload or adrenal depletion. Literally ended up like sick in bed for 6 months because of adrenal overload and adrenal addiction due to, you know, exactly as you said, that kind of driven type A, high achievement, constantly on the go, and just burned out her adrenals.
One of the most neglected, and if there's one bit of wisdom I can offer today, maybe this is it more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
It's that the nervous system health is neglected by almost everyone. So, and I say this with a doctor father, but if you go to a hospital, very unlikely anyone's going to talk about your nervous system health. And this is a real shame.
Right.
Because the reality is that most of us live with chronic stress in America. And if you have chronic stress, there's so many things that your autonomic nervous system, right, the part of you that is sort of subconsciously operating the equipment underneath it all, that autonomic nervous system is going to be in what's called a sympathetic state much of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when that is happening, and when your sympathetic nervous system is active, it's fight or flight.
Yeah.
You're afraid, right? You're very, very deeply afraid. And now your body isn't going to be allocating its scarce resources towards digestion, towards rest. Instead, you're going to be fearing whatever's going to happen next. Something that might not actually be worthy of any fear at all. Your body's scarce resources are going to be wasted and squandered. Virtually every leader that I talk to in this day and age, of any organization, of any kind of size, has something like this to some degree. If your body's scarce resources are not being used to recover, you're going to suffer. You're going to run out of juice, pure and simple, and you will be bedridden for a long, long time, and you will not be able to serve at your highest level. You will not be able to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think more and more people are really coming to terms with that. So what did you find, Dan? I have a couple questions. What did you find for yourself that helped you out of burnout? And then I'm also interested to hear a little bit about the way that you're coaching high-level executives from a whole body, whole health perspective. So I'd love to hear both of those.
Sure. And in many ways, for me, it's been a many year-long journey. And I think I would rate myself about 90% of the way through it. I don't even think I'm fully through it, to be really, really honest and vulnerable. But I'll say that it's a journey that requires a great deal of persistence. The damage, depending on the depth of the damage that you've done, it can take
I want to be
quite
sure
a
I'm
while.
understanding. You mean the journey of recovering from burnout? Is that?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right.
I want to be sure I understood that.
Exactly. It can take quite a lengthy amount of time, and you can do all kinds of things to sabotage yourself along that journey. If you subject yourself to more stress than you can handle, and you will most likely overestimate how much stress your body can really, really handle, then you can reverse progress quite quickly. Yeah. So it takes some real persistence and commitment to get there.
Yeah.
What does the journey look like, to answer your next question? So, a vast majority of my time is spent working on, acquiring and growing and running psychotherapy practices according to a different model, a model where psychotherapists are less stressed, a model where they can focus purely on being therapists and healing themselves, right? Rather than being business people, which is very, very stressful for them and they're very misaligned in doing. But 5% of my time is spent coaching a few select, very high-performing executives who find themselves in this place of burnout and acknowledge it and can't run from that fact. And we start with their nervous system health. Mm-hmm. So we take a look at a deep level, what are the greatest sources of stress? But it's not just about removing them. It's about understanding that after those stressors are removed or diminished to the extent that we can, stress lives in the body. It stays with you, okay? It's a really, really tricky concept to understand, but you can remove all the stressors in the world. But if you don't address your body's ability to process the stress that is within, the emotional weight that is deep within you, then you can find yourself back at square one quite easily. And so it's about understanding, how do you rest even in moments that might otherwise have caused stress? How do you build an extremely resilient nervous system so that when you go back out into the world and you're trying to hit grand slam home runs, you can step up to the plate with some energy and some vitality. It's also about understanding, what is your unique situation? What have you gone through that others haven't? And I'm not a licensed psychotherapist. I'm not a licensed anything other than a lawyer, actually. But so I certainly don't have all the answers here. So I bring with me a team of not just licensed psychotherapists, but healers from a number of different disciplines. These are MDs. These are chiropractors in some cases. These are physical therapists. Is remember, there's a lot that's lodged within your body. There's many different disciplines that few people have heard of that can do incredible work to help your system relax in such a way that the places where emotion, weight, stress, those places in the body where it's stored, they can release.
Wow.
Slowly but surely, you can start to relax. And then you can get to a place where your nervous system is focused on its parasympathetic state, the part of you that can rest and digest. And then you can bring that part of you even to performance situations. You don't have to approach life from a place of desperation anymore. You can approach life from a place of calmness and really, really strong nervous system health. And it's a beautiful journey to go on. And the good news is that some of the most important work on trauma was done at the University of Pennsylvania, where the positive psychology school looked at post-traumatic growth. Yeah. Everyone has heard the term PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. What is much less known is post-traumatic growth. This experience, this weight, this suffering that you've endured can actually be the key to living a more vital, richer, happier, and more conscious life than you could ever imagine than you had before the burnout, before the weight, before the suffering. It is there for you. It is there for you if you really want it.
Absolutely. It really is all in how we're able to integrate the difficult experiences into our lives that will determine if we experience post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic growth, or maybe first post-traumatic stress and then post-traumatic growth.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That is fantastic. I want to understand what you're saying about the nervous system a little bit more.
Yeah.
How does one build a vibrant, resilient nervous system? I think that was the phrase that you used that really caught my eye. So how does someone build that?
Yeah.
Consciously.
I love that question. We don't ask it often enough. There's a variety of different approaches. I think one great place to start, there are some really, really simple remedies out there, but a beautiful place to start is lemon balm tea. So this is extremely powerful for relaxing you in a very sustainable way.
Did you say lemon balm tea?
Lemon balm tea. Google it when we're done. Yeah. Okay. So lemon balm tea, which you can get for $5 off of Amazon, which can show up at your front door, thanks to Papa Jeff. He'll deliver it. Yeah. If you have lemon balm tea, I can almost guarantee you your nervous system is going to start to relax.
Wow.
You are going to be in a place where you can approach. If you have that just a couple of times a day, you're going to start to be able to approach your daily life, even the more stressful aspects of your professional life, with quite a bit more calm. For me, I'll give you a bunch of other things. A meditation practice is just a beautiful way, right? Absolutely. To be with the ups and downs of life. And there's plenty of research on about a number of different types of meditation and how those can relax you. I would say, a beautiful, beautiful part of the journey for me has been a physical therapy technique called myofascial release.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
You familiar with that?
I am, yeah.
So the fascia, this connective tissue, right, within ourselves holds an enormous amount of stress. Enormous amount of stress. And if you find a skilled practitioner in that technique, they can do wonders for you. Nice. I'm going to give the audience one more. I know this is a whole bunch.
No, it's great. I love being practical. It's wonderful.
We've got to understand what we can do right away, because this is an epidemic that's everywhere.
Exactly right.
Spinal health is very important. And that's because the vagus nerve, which is sending signals back and forth between the brain and the body, right? The vagus nerve is hugely, hugely important in nervous system health. Yeah. You want to be at a place where your parasympathetic system, the part of you that triggers rest and digest, You want that to be active much of the time, not all the time, because we do have to run away from the lion and the tiger when they're truly kind of trying to get us. So, then you want to be in a sympathetic place.
Yeah.
But most of the time, we're not really threatened, and we shouldn't be in a place where we think we are. So our spinal health, the vagus nerve, the bundle of nerves that is sending signals about when we should be stressed, when we should relax, when we should be in parasympathetic, when we should be in sympathetic. That vagus nerve can best send signals when our spine is extremely healthy. And so some of the best chiropractors in the world who I work with have the ability to do a nervous system reset through aligning your spine properly. So you will often see people who have the worst burnout have very bad posture. Their spinal health is very poor, hence their vagus nerve is not sending the correct signals about when to be stressed and when not to be.
Wow. Yeah, I've studied a bit about polyvagal theory, and love learning about the really critical importance of the vagus nerve and how it really is central to our ability to regulate, to self-regulate, which is central to stress management, which is central to avoiding burnout, as you are well attending to. Well, this is fantastic, Dan. So you're looking for mental health practices that you would be interested to acquire and help them run their business. You would run their business, help them do that better. That's really what the center of your work is with Fireside is now.
That's right. That's the vast majority of what I do. And we have a team, thankfully, of far beyond me, of people that are extremely knowledgeable, people who have purchased and in some cases sold very large mental health practices.
Wonderful.
And we have some brilliant, brilliant people, number of whom are licensed, a number of whom are clinical psychologists. And I'm blessed to learn from them every day, both about mental and behavioral health and the business of mental and behavioral health.
Yeah.
And right now, unfortunately, the industry is just not set up to produce the best outcomes.
Yeah. Are you interested in acquiring clinics as well, or just practices?
So the focus at the moment is acquiring practices. Okay. However, some of the practices we acquire we're looking at one right now that is at the cutting edge of some new technologies that have a ton of potential. So nice. TMS is one of them, transcranial magnetic stimulation.
I'm very well familiar with it. Yeah, TMS. Yep. Yeah, I have a friend who just went through it last summer.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Did they find it helpful?
He did, very much so.
Great.
Great. So, yeah. All right, Dan, this is really fascinating to me. I wish I would have met you 10, 15 years ago when I was closing my psychotherapy practice. It would have been lovely to know you and maybe think about other options. But people are, I assume I have mental health practitioners who listen to my show because I was a clinician for so long. How can people reach out to you? Where's it best for them to find you and perhaps talk about collaborating?
Yeah, really the two types of collaboration that are sort of highest on our agenda at the moment is, number one, if you are a practice owner and you have a team of at least 7 or 8 therapists, a number of whom are full-time, you can go to our website and you'll see there's a couple of other requirements that we list for practices that are of interest to us. So number one, you can go to our website, take a look at those requirements. There's a contact page, or you can reach out to me directly at dan@firesidestrategic.com. And then number two, if you're a leader who is willing to do really, really deep work, if anything that Jackie and I have discussed resonates with you, if the nexus of burnout and leadership is the place where you need to focus your personal growth plan, then you can also email me at that same address, dan@firesidestrategic.com. I'll usually just have space for a couple of leaders. I think I have just one space at the moment. Most of my time is spent with purchasing and running practices. But if that's of interest to you, if either of those opportunities for collaboration are of interest, then dan@firesidestrategic.com or the website are the ways to get me.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Dan, thank you so much for, I love that. I love talking to cutting edge thought leaders and what you're doing with acquiring mental health practices and addressing burnout in the mental health field. I just think is so important for us, because if those at the front lines of caring for others' mental and emotional health are not well, that does not bode well for the well-being of our world.
No,
We want to
no.
hire, if we want to heal our culture and our planet, we first have to heal ourselves. So thank you for your contribution to that, Dan, and what you are contributing to the world through this new initiative of yours. I'm really excited about it. And thank you for
Oh,
being my guest on the Conscious Living podcast.
that means a lot, and it's so important for us to live more consciously for the health of the planet, for the health of ourselves and those around us. So salute the work you're doing as well. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much.